Alfred Darlington, better known by his stage name Daedelus, is a longtime stalwart of the LA hip-hop beat scene. Hailing from Santa Monica, Daedelus has been active as a producer for over 18 years and has released on numerous labels including Brainfeeder, Ninja Tune, Anticon, Dome of Doom, and Plug Research. This year, he moved to Boston to join the faculty at the Berklee College of Music. A few days before his first show as a resident of the city, Griffin Andres and I sat down with Daedelus in the WHRB studio to talk about everything from instruments and samples to the big names in beat making to his career and trends in the culture of electronic music. All right, so a warm welcome to Daedelus, joining us in the studio. In his 18 years active, is it 18? Correct?
It's like 20 now
20?
or something.
Wow.
It's just gotten up.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So you've released over 21 albums, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right.
And you're releasing on Brainfeeder, Ninja Tune, Plug Research, and several more labels.
Yeah, Anticon and others, but I think labels are now deficient, right? There's I'm happy that people maybe feeling the Brainfeeder thing,
right?
Ninja Tune, but we're all collectives now, right?
Totally.
We're all just like in this wild mix of however you're going to get the music, however it gets to the audience. It's just, that's the entire game.
Right. Yeah, you have to do what you have to do.
Just meet people where they are.
Yeah.
That's not on a label because, I don't know if you noticed, but like there barely is even like a metadata line for label on a lot of these services. It's just like the artist name, record, and good luck.
Right, yeah. No, totally. And like when you're on Spotify, you just see like at the bottom.
Yeah.
Like
if
So you grew up in California, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Southern California, like an area of Santa Monica called Dogtown.
Okay.
I didn't know about that growing up there because it isn't like we have necessarily like a big sign saying like welcome to the slummier side of Santa Monica. But it's where they invented modern skateboarding and some other things.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you skate?
I mean, badly, yes. But I definitely felt from a young age that I was doing it badly because I came from a place where people did it well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So did you grow up with musical training, like as a child? Did you take lessons with anything?
Well, I don't know about yourself and kind of the way that you found your ins into music. I know for myself that like I didn't have family that was doing it. I just had like an unending, upending curiosity towards it. And so I didn't know about any way of making a living in it. I didn't know about career paths or nothing. I just knew that I needed to like put as much sound into my ears as possible.
Yeah.
It made much more sense than anything I was seeing or smelling or other senses. It just sound all the time. So it wasn't like musical training from the start, but it was quickly evident that if I wanted to continue, I had to do things like band in school and orchestra and whatever else I could get my hands on so I could spend more times in my ears than my eyes.
Yeah.
So
was there like one moment that you can remember when you realized that you were such an audiophile? Like,
well, I mean, yeah, just that thing. And maybe, again, like maybe you have something similar in your pocket, but like I just had moments where I would hear a song on the radio in my case, but I would just hear some recorded media and just be like, oh, this is my everything from now on. And like it would be something I would encounter once and maybe never again, especially with the scarcity that existed some years ago. And why get so stuck on a thing and why have it be so important to space to like have that sound happen again? That flipped me out. Like there was some songs on the radio that I was like, wait, when can I hear that again? And it would just be, it'd be like this big question mark. Like who knows if it ever is going to be back on, and you just be sitting by the radio dial, like trying to get something again.
Right.
And I'm sure it's a little different in the exact moment that we're in. It's like you can hear something, you can immediately get it on Shazam, go SoundHound and just like find the thing, listen to it again. But it is that thing of every time you interact with the sound source, it can be a moving experience. And so then if you know you have that bug, if you know that there's something deep inside you that like is obsessive over the thing,
right,
then you're doomed.
Yeah. I always hate, even with Shazam and SoundHound, I hate when you have like a melody stuck in your head and you don't know the words, you don't know the song name, and you're stuck with that,
Yep.
and you're never gonna discover it.
Well, but equally, I love it too when you like. I have a lot of friends that do remixes and kind of work to change the source, and so there'll be a thing of like, oh, that's a familiar song. I know that song, and wait, they've taken it somewhere else, and you know it's in their like private stash.
Yeah.
And occasionally they'll do a drop, but most of the time they're going to hoard it until like it must come out, or like years later when you just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, I adore that too. That like a lot of creative friends are putting their juice on things.
Right. Yeah. So how old were you when you first started producing?
Badly, and without knowing, probably like 12 or 13.
Oh, wow.
But that's like the kind of stuff where I was just doing like tape operations and experiments with like guitar pedals, and didn't have that much, but just trying to find like I'd been playing instruments for a long time, since I was like 4 or 5. So bass clarinet and double bass were like my instruments.
Oh, wow.
And I also thought there wasn't a future in electronic music. I just had no idea that people did this for a living. I just was like, I was kind of in a bubble of classical music and jazz. And so I went to school for jazz, in fact, because I thought that was the sensible choice, weirdly, and that my interest in electronic music was like, oh, this is something I'm doing on the side, kind of like secretively, because I didn't really technically have the time to do that. But I was making these like tape operation music and stuff, like weird musique concrète things that only later on I found out I was like, oh, that's musique concrète. Like I was sampling sources from around me and trying to make music out of it. But then, yeah, like more seriously, when I was like 18 or 19, started to try to make music. And that's why I probably have 21 records, is because some of that early stuff is just like really out experiment stuff.
Right. Yeah. So where did you get the name Daedelus? I mean, there's the reference to the figure in Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Although you do spell it differently with an E instead of an A.
Yeah. It's kind of what some people call the British spelling. You find it around out there a little bit more often.
Really?
But that being said, like, yeah, I didn't know that I was spelling wrong, but thank goodness, because the searchable names nowadays is a real thing. And if you have the name that's like, I'm a fan of the band Crumb, which I know has some history here in town. Good luck finding them if you don't really put Crumb the band or something, like, you know what I mean? If you're just like, oh, I like this band Crumb, and they're like, oh, doomed.
Yeah.
But that being said, hard to search name.
Right.
All to the good, just one of those things.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of grateful. But also I had sources from like James Joyce, and there was an old anime, actually, a Japanese animation called Robotech in America that had the right arm of the SDF-1 was called the Daedalus. And I just remember as a kid, you just have all these different sources that kind of start to pour into an idea.
Yeah.
You don't know where it sticks from. But I'll tell you, do you have an alias? Do you have like a DJ name that you go by?
No.
It is one of the time-honored and wonderful harrowing traditions of like, oh, I'm going to pick something because I need a name for a flyer, right? But then that thing could potentially follow you for the rest of your life. So you better pick properly. Yeah. But also at the same time, like, it's just a name. Like, just a, like we all can change our name at any given time. Like, there's no beholdenness to the past. And yet, like, why,
Yeah. What was the reference to Joyce? Was it from Ulysses?
Ulysses in part, but also more so the Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man.
Right.
Yeah. Stephen Daedelus.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Spelled again differently. Another different spelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's the god of invention. Is that correct?
No, he was a mortal.
Okay.
But like kind of a fable type character. He was the greatest inventor of the ancient era, father of Icarus, made wings of wax to fly across the Aegean Sea. Wow. Famously killed his cousin. Killed other people, I think, too. I don't know why so much killing, but that was Greek mythology, right?
Yeah.
To a T.
Yeah.
They did that kind of stuff.
I used to have a book of Greek myths in my bathroom. It was the best thing to read.
It's good poop material.
Totally, yeah. So your debut album was appropriately called Invention.
That was like yes, that is true. I had some other material that came out before then. But like as a proper like foot forward, Invention was the one. Yeah. And it's funny, it still lasts. That was a while ago, and it still like got legs on it.
Right, yeah.
That all mostly because of that song Experience, but
Madlib took it and used it in Accordion with Doom. And I think that's like probably one of the most famous samples on that whole record, and
it is the only one they credited
really
in the Mad Villain record. So I'm grateful that they had the wherewithal to ask me, and I of course gave permission, and then they put it in the liner notes. But but other than that, like, yeah, it's fun to be Rare Groove. Like I do plenty of sampling, or I did plenty of sampling previously.
Yeah.
And to be rendered Rare Groove by such a master like Madlib is fantastic.
So did you know him before he got reach out to you, or?
Yeah, actually the reason that happened, from what I'm told, and so not to be silly, but like, so Invention, there's an accompanying EP called The Quiet Party.
Mm-hmm.
And The Quiet Party features a few other tracks that aren't on the record, but then also some remixes. One of the remixes of Playing Parties, which is the first track on Invention. Mm-hmm. So I hired Madlib in part to do a remix of that song.
Okay.
And I paid him in weed.
Oh.
And you can actually hear on the first little music section of Playing Parties, it's like a panned bong rip. It's incredible. Like, so I assume he is using the weed as sound source, which is
let's
music
hear that.
concrete. Yeah. So yeah, The Quiet Party in there. And I believe he, maybe in the kind of the haze, of literal haze that he was doing, he perhaps remixed other tracks. And so one of them might have been indeed Experience.
Oh, I see.
Or
Okay.
what became a later accordion.
Right.
Yeah.
So wait, that is actually a real accordion. It's not a synth or anything.
No, it's not a synth, but it is an actual like automatic organ, kind of like an automatic pump organ in part.
Okay.
But he's thought it was an accordion, which is totally valid.
What's the difference?
And I've definitely played it as an accordion on stage with them for a tour, so that was fun.
Okay.
But the difference is that you can hear the clack of the keys. Now, on a typical accordion, you have one hand on keys and then one hand on buttons or other keys,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that is the song I made is a 4-handed part. So it takes at least 4 hands to play the part. On accordion, I would have had to have had lots and lots and lots of takes.
Yeah.
But on this automatic organ, it just took 2.
And there's that clicking in it too.
And that clicking probably wouldn't have been as pronounced on an actual accordion, but
I see.
On the automatic organ.
Yeah.
And by automatic organ, I just mean it like breathes for you. You don't have to like pump it on the back like some old school organs.
Oh yeah.
Let's give that a listen.
Take
Do you know like how many different instruments did you use on that album?
Oh gosh, all kinds. Because I also a young friend of mine from high school actually, but who's been making incredible music ever since. Is a guy Ben Wendell.
Mm-hmm.
He's on that record Invention, so I've known him for the longest. But also some other players as well. And then I just tried my hand at a bunch of instruments too. I play a few things badly and a few things okay. And then I'm happy to say that, with the magic of production, you can make anything work.
Yeah.
I'm curious about like Madlib as an individual. He's like a god figure to me
He's
in
amazing.
music. I mean, he like is. Have you've like spent time with him?
Yeah, we did some touring together, and just in general, like him being such an LA force, although he is a bit reclusive, you'll see him out at nights and parties, and he's a sweetheart, not always the most talkative. I had a running joke with him for a period of time where we'd be playing festivals together, not always, on the same exact stage, but like we'd be backstage together. And he was a little bit too demure, especially in European countries, from asking where the weed was at. And sometimes in Japan too, where it's a little bit illegal. So like he's a little bit aware of, or very illegal, and he's a little bit aware of that, and like not wanting to be the one to kind of get out of the box. But he's like, definitely not trying to wait till the show where people are just handing him weed. So he would just look at me and be like, "Yo, where's the weed at?" And I'm like, I don't. Okay, sure. And I just would go ask the promoter, literally just be like, "Hey, Madlib wants some weed." And the promoter, of course, was like ready for this instance, like immediately would hand me the weed to give to him. And I would come back to him with just like whatever, oodles, I guess. And he was always like, "Oh, thank you so much. Like you always know where." And I'm just like, it's all good. Like, just ask the promoter. Like, they're ready.
I didn't know it was a currency for making remixes.
I don't know if it generally is. I don't think this is anything revelatory and new, but like California is, of course, quite a weeded state.
Yeah.
And knowing people that for a long time have been very concerned with their agriculture, I think it makes it a wonderful possible currency when you have friends that want to be friends with other friends.
Right. Okay.
I don't know how else to say that. I'm trying to be respectful and mindful of my new job. So,
I mean, it's kind of legal. Is it kind of?
It's super legal here now, right? There's dispensaries.
There are dispensaries and stuff, but it's still like kind of like it's not like widespread. You know, like there aren't any dispensaries in Cambridge or anything.
I find that so interesting. It's I know there's like a line around the block for the one that's in Brookline, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like if there's such demand,
where's the supply? Yeah.
Especially when we're talking, you know, from a more of a medical standpoint, needful people.
There are medical dispensaries closer, but that's the only real recreational dispensary serving the greater Boston area.
Yeah, but I even think the recreational is very medical in its nature. It may not be specifically treating an illness, but just the woes of modern life are enough to keep us in thinking about alternates. Then
Totally, yeah.
Yesterday's new Quintet's always the most beautifully noisy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, especially that era, he was really going in on the complete jazz offerings where he was playing all the different instruments. You know, it was not quantized, but it was just so obviously like from one mind, from one hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's really gorgeous.
I love the whole concept of that whole universe of music, because he really built out all these characters as well. Like it wasn't like each of the members of the quintet sort of has their sonic identity, even though they're all like him at the end of the day. Like
but they feel of like the bifurcated mind, right? They're feeling of their own selves, and even like Quasimodo with all the different voice effects, where it's like, okay, it's all just Mad Lib, right? But then you hear like the high voice versus the low voice, and it's just like, you know.
Yeah, when you have a Mad Lib feature on a Quasimodo song, like
it makes so much sense though. But yeah, really excellent, awesome person, in my experience.
Do you know Doom as well?
We definitely, we worked together. We had that song Impending Doom.
Mm-hmm.
So other than accordion, I had the chance to work with him on a feature. And I don't know him well. I don't know if it's possible to know Daniel terribly well. But I have, we've hung out without the mask, and we've played shows together. Like I said, when I did the Mad Villain tour, I was playing accordion. That was also with J-Lib too. So I got a chance to work with Dilla at that time.
Oh,
nice.
Wow, yeah.
But that being said, I was a younger self when I didn't take a moment to really talk it out. I was a little bit too starstruck / like tour struck at the whole thing. It was a lot of, a while ago. So it was earlier in my own cycle. So I didn't take advantage of the situation, but you never know, it's like in the moments, you just never know what actually is important.
Right.
You just kind of get caught up in the stress.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, yeah, Daniel and I, to get some moments. And he is that character. He really is prescient of what being a villain is.
Yeah, the mask never comes off unless you're behind the scenes, right?
Yeah. I mean, he really revels in the fact that people don't recognize him immediately, even if you kind of know what he looks like. He just is a towering figure on a stage, and it's impressive. And then he comes off stage, and it's glasses and a bit more demure and a bit, he kind of hides in his clothes and all that stuff, and it's different.
Yeah,
different. But it was fun, yeah. If you, there's especially a nice Rusty remix. It's kind of obscure. It's out there of our song Impending Doom. And Rusty, I don't know if you're familiar with Rusty. Him and Hudmo kind of ruled Glasgow for a while and invented that really champagne kind of future, like very hard-hitting Tonight kind of sounds.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a killer remix, though.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely check it out. So on the note of talking about Doom and his mask and everything, I want to talk about your style. So it seems very inventive, and you, I love the sideburns and everything. Nice. Is there like any story behind everything, or is it like just who you are?
I mean, it's definitely who I am now, but I think from being from that same dog town that I mentioned earlier.
Oh yeah.
I think that thing of like, for the first 18 years of my life, I wore shorts and a t-shirt, like without, like unwaveringly, like there was
not thinking about it.
There was not enough weather to merit anything else, and like being from a beachside community, and just like kind of only seeing this one way to be, being fascinated with other kinds of expression like music, but Everything else is just like, I don't get it, right? But then I think really quickly, if you start to really interrogate what we're offering in the world, it's like fashion is this big tell.
Yeah.
It's like you're kind of constantly yelling at the top of your lungs, like who you are and what you're about by what you're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, I mean, not to get all obscure, but there was this one philosopher type character named Beau Brummel,
Mm-hmm.
who in my searching of invention gets cited a lot in the Victorian era because he invented this kind of democratic notion of importance. Whereas before in like the Regency and elsewise, you had people who were important because they had money and land and power.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much like you were something because you were of something.
Right.
Versus Beau Brummel had this idea that everything he did was art and artfully done, and therefore it had aesthetic value that reached through his status and class.
Yeah.
And basically invented cool, which is a little dangerous because obviously it's now been weaponized against us in branding and such.
Yeah. Are you is this related to the idea of a dandy?
Oh yeah, he invented dandyism.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I see.
Not in total. I mean, like there was definitely people before that who were all about spezzatura or all these other.
But
terms.
is the dandy not aristocratic?
No, it's like of the people. And actually, so the dandy look that I'm espousing and that you see other people doing is modeled after like what would have been a commoner soldier type character, like military garb. So that's why you see like the tailcoats and even like the pointy shoes and all that stuff. That was all stuff that people would wear in like battle.
Yeah.
And like would be like basic conscripts and whatnot into like, and they were of the normal people, but they got to hobnob with the royalty who were like kind of forced to also be on battlefields. It's funny business.
I wonder what the 2019 equivalent of a dandy would be like.
I think we see it all the time. I mean, I think really with the kind of, if you look at the battles that are being fought right now in terms of identity, in terms of expression, in terms of the environment, I think that would be the closest thing aligned with the idea of a democratization of the importance of the space we're in. So it's funny, as much as the dandy had a certain look of a warrior class at essence, like a mercenary class. I think nowadays the dandies, the modern equivalent would be somebody who was also exploring fashion in its uppercase meanings, but that would probably be of a gender neutrality.
Right.
Just like the dandy had like these oversized expressions of like they were wearing corsets and they were wearing like what is now high heels.
Right.
But from a very different vantage.
Yeah.
But I think the same things apply.
Right. It's definitely very avant-garde. And
well, it's also like it's like you become hyper aware of everything you're wearing when you have to consider it and what it's saying or what you think it's saying. And I think we're all betrayed by our clothing constantly, though. We make choices that are like, when we're still asleep before coffee, and it says so much about us. It tattletales behind our back the rest of the day.
Totally, yeah.
Anyways, much too much time to think about these kind of things when you're on tour. I'll tell you what. Like
really?
When you have like 8 hours of like, I'm not playing a show for the next 8 hours. I'm in a layover. I'm on a plane. What does this all mean? Why are people turning up night after night? All the people stay the same age. They stay, they're all like lit in the same ways. And you just experience that again and again and again until you're so cooked that you either have to find meaning out of all that or you just get subsumed.
Do you think it all comes down to like the sounds, or is it sort of you can't put all of the meaning that your tour gives you into just like the music that you're playing, or is it like sort of do you sort of derive the value from the whole experience, or does it sort of stick with the music?
It's tough, right? How much can music really communicate and carry?
Yeah.
Especially when you, by necessity, it has to party in a certain way.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's really interesting to get onto for example, your latest album, the Bitterinders.
Bitterinders.
Yeah. So it's not a album to dance to. It's
heavens.
Not at all.
If you could find the dance in that, I would think you would be throwing some really unique shapes.
So do you think that like when people think about electronic music, they think of it in a utilitarian sense for like dancing and like having a good time? Do you think that's sort of a prevailing assumption around electronic music? That
I mean, I think it's the prevailing thought, right? The prevailing weather is that, I can get lit to this in these specific ways that I feel comfortable with. I can be high in specific ways that I feel comfortable with. And I don't have to think, which is something I'm comfortable with.
And so do you think your album makes people think more, or what's the?
It's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hope that people would encounter this music not so much as like I'm going to go have a depressing thought full time, as much as here's a sonic experience that I can wade into and wash over me.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't want necessarily people to have to think to. And, you know, indeed, even this music that I'm calling depressing or I'm calling difficult, to somebody else, they might just be like, oh, this is beautiful and straightforward. And I don't want them to be, even though the name and all the aspects of the artwork kind of start to hint at something, if somebody walks in this blind, they won't necessarily get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it's there for them. It's the details have been sewn in so that if people want to go deeper, all those facets are present.
What does the name mean?
So the Bitterinders were the name for the Afrikaans leftovers from the Second Boer War that were literally there till the bitter end.
Yeah, and there were concentration camps, and
the modern invention of concentration camp comes from this conflict in part.
Right.
There was obviously a lot of versions of people who were jailed and otherwise, but yeah, this was a little bit more difficult. A lot more difficult in terms of this meaning. And then also guerrilla warfare is partially invented in this conflict as well. Like it also dates back, you know, the kind of whole ambush idea, but this is people living off the land for hundreds of years, but still not their land. The Free Orange people, who were Dutch separatists that came and later became the Afrikaans, weren't exactly the original owners either. And so you don't have these strange colonial powers battling over what is essentially other people's land, making huge decisions of people who died a lot, others, and they aren't talked about in the books.
Right,
it's so
totally
funny. Hundreds of thousands of those people died, but the British and the Free Orange people, not so much. But we still, that's who gets eulogized. That's.
I mean, I think that's always the story of like there's tragedy everywhere, and we don't have enough space or time to
just capacity.
Right,
Our heart's capacity only can take so much.
Right. But yeah, it's a wonderful album. I recognized
the transition is it's good though. No, I appreciate that.
I recognized some of the titles. So I studied Zulu actually in high school.
Amazing. That's Durban's near there.
Yeah, and your fourth track is Sangoma, which is like a traditional healer.
Yeah.
And
so this record is part of a series of records I've done for Brain Feeder, which I'm calling the End of Empire trilogy. So the first one was this Righteous Fist for Harmony that all had to do with the Boxer Rebellion that happened in China, also in a similar time period. And then an earlier conflict called the Crimean War, which ended up being this record called the Light Brigade.
Okay.
And so all three of these records are going to be coming out as a box set fairly soon,
I see.
November 15th, I think. And
wow.
They all represent these 3-year conflicts from the Victorian period that not only were wars fought or conflicts that happened in these like faraway colonial powered places, but also all had mysticism involved in these really abrupt ways. And I don't know if you're familiar, but the Second Boer War, part of the conflict, is you may or may not have studied in school. I know you went to school in Durban, but that being said, I don't think it gets talked about very much, but there was these witch smellers.
Yeah.
Because both sides had conscripted or enlisted local healers and what was then at the time called witches. So both sides also had anti-witch forces to go hunt the other side's mystic power. Like it's crazy.
But the mystic people they're not colonialists. They're the local indigenous people.
But as per everything, you know, there's so much more complication to these things. And also when you are basically put upon in ways that are, you know, it's like, unfortunately, because the Zulu had lost conflicts years before against the British and, you know, the Afrikaans people represented both the kind of powers that people understood versus the new power that they didn't understand. So there's this whole pick a side because somebody's winning, somebody's losing. It gets very complicated.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, witch smellers, right?
Well, I mean, it's so incredible how much historical thought and considerations and there's like a historical narrative behind your work, and it's
just there for people who are navel gazing like myself.
Right, yeah.
People who need to lose themselves in a party, that's there too. Not so much on this record, but maybe something else.
Are you into like a lot of ambient stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. But more so the kind of the harder edges of ambience, more the noise side of ambient music than the kind of like study and chill too kind of things. But that being said, it's all valid. It's just interesting. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
We on the radio we have a what we call an orgy, which is like an extended playlist of a certain genre artist. So they can go on for like 8-9 hours. And I did one that was on just ambient stuff.
Awesome.
So like a lot of Aphex Twin and I don't know. It was like the study and chill sort of stuff, but also it sort of went places. And I wasn't even expecting it. Just like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as one would hope, I hope you had some Tim Hecker on there or something. It's a great concept, though, of having like a longer extended playlist to kind of a deeper dive into a genre.
Yeah, totally.
It's great. Yeah, Tim Hecker recently moved to Los Angeles. So even before I left, I recently left Los Angeles for Boston. And I'm now doing this professor thing at Berklee, specializing in electronic music over there in their EPD department. But before I left, there's an influx of people moving to LA right now. I don't know why dance music in the greater industry has decided. I think it's because the musicianship that's present, like you have everything from like the world of jazz and the world of electronic music kind of coalescing in this space and then working together. And even though people like Snarky Puppy aren't from LA, like so many of the members live there now. And indeed, Tim Hecker moved there not too long ago.
Okay.
And he would drive around LA with a green, super fast powered motorcycle, like an all like bright green, and then in green like motorcycle leathers. And he's a really tall Canadian dude. And so it'd just be this like, what is this like Hulk running around? And then just to know that he makes like super chill ambient music. I like how people can be the contradictions.
Right. Yeah, totally. So wait, there was a documentary that you released called Secondhand Sure Shots. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And it's about, you went to, you sort of hunted around thrift stores for vinyls, and you sort of like created a craft, or like, what was the result of that out of collecting these vinyls?
So the idea was really like to have the challenge of just having a few dollars and visually search through a record store, but in this case, not so much a record store as like a thrift store, and get vinyl to create beats. And those beats then are kind of paying homage to this idea of digging, crate digging. You find something that looks interesting. You like listen to it at your house and you're like, you're needle dropping on the record, trying to find the magic. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but maybe through your own craft or deft, you can make something. And then we made acetates. We made like test presses of the vinyl, and we dropped it back in the record store to kind of then return back into like the conversation.
Oh, okay.
But that being said, it was such an all-star cast. J-Rock.
Oh.
Yeah, J-Rock was part of it. And then so was DJ Nobody, who was from Low End Theory fame. And then also very specially, Ross G was another member of that cast of characters. So he passed away not too long ago.
Oh.
And but yeah, it was a real special project and really cool to kind of like dive a little bit deeper into the whole craft of beat making from that perspective of like not really knowing what you're getting yourself into at any given time.
Yeah. How do you think sampling has changed since you had to go digging in crates to now when you can just like search Spotify? How is it? What's different?
Yeah, not even so much Spotify as Splice. Like on Splice, they have things down to like I need a riser that's an A that has this much melodic movement. And you're like, boop, boop, boop. You look at those keywords and you're just like, you can easily assemble a complete, especially let's say trap song in like 15 seconds.
Oh my.
Just like, oh. And then it will sound like every other song that uses both those samples and most things on the radio. But it is an abundantly interesting how easy it is to assemblage, which is nothing wrong with that. Like the idea of sampling is quite simpler in terms of like you might find a magic moment on a record that you just loop that sample, as Madlib is oft to do. But it's funny because with his touch, it feels transformed. It may only be slightly changed, but you just know that his attention got you there. And after the thousands and thousands of records that he's gone through to result and end up in that loop, that spot is remarkable versus the person who's like, okay, these hi-hats, these ratchet snares, this 808 pattern, just it dovetails together just ever so easy. It becomes that thing that others have access to. So there's a little bit of that like push and pull between the ease and scarcity. But then I also love the fact too that you can take, the formula has gotten so rigid that when you just change it slightly, like Soul Action is a funny example. Like they had house and they just started doing halftime trap under house. And that isn't an original concept. They just made that their signature so much that like you hear it now and you're like, oh, that's like somebody from Soul Action probably. Yeah. Because they do that on every track. But it's so cool. And it just becomes like an easy way of having an in that changes the whole mess of it.
Right, yeah. I love, like this isn't on the production side, but like who sampled
Yeah,
is
Who
so
Sampled Who
fun.
is amazing.
You can just go like for hours, just like
and
going back and back and back.
Oh, it's so great, especially when you find those tracks that have like been sampled by 75 people. Like, what happens?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get paid? Wait, when you're on Who Sampled, do you get like? Well, I guess you get money first. Never mind. When you get like.
So that song Experience of Mine has been sampled by a lot of people who were inspired by accordion to make their own versions.
Right.
Sometimes those people pay, but most of the time they're just like doing a mixtape. Like Trey Songz used the accordion beat essentially, but used like Experience to make an accordion beat on a mixtape. It's never going to pay money, but it's just neat to know that's out there. And then someone like Sir Michael Rocks did an official version, which sure that paid a little bit, but it was just more cool to see how Sir Michael Rocks changed things. And then there's tons of Boss used that same beat. Like you can just find all that stuff out from Who Sampled Who.
Do you like sometimes not even know that people are?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, I didn't know Casey Veggies used my track, but it's like once you hear it, it's just like, oh, that's clearly the thing. And then there's more cropping up all the time. Mr. Carmack just did a flip of accordion or Experience.
You call it accordion. You're referring to it as
because it's the transformed version. Like my song is so. At essence, like such a little chanson, such a little like ambient thing,
right.
And accordion is such like that's what is in our minds.
Yeah, it slaps.
I have a hard time not hearing the bass line when I play my own song.
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
But the thing that's funny is like Weird Al Yankovic a while ago, like the Roots had him on, and he was playing an accordion, and they had him learn accordion, my song, right, or the song, and he played it wrong. Partially because of what I told you with its like four-handedness, but also just like the voice leading's a little bit deceptive. And I just want to like put out like a video of just how to play the song properly so people stop messing it up. But that being said, probably not the best idea for me to do that.
Yeah.
Lest I want more people to sample, weirdly. It's all good.
So you're at Berklee now, and that's been going for not too long, right?
It's like 2 months. I just had my midterms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I see.
Super weird.
And so it's a new department that they have there for electronic production, or
not a new department. EPD's been there for quite some time, actually. EPD stands for Electronic Production and Design, and they are helping the future producers of tomorrow, but also a lot of the sound design and also programming. So anything that's sound programming, anything that's instrument making and modular working, they're very much in charge of. There is a new division at the school, though, which is called EDI, and it's not so much a division in the classic sense of like a whole different school within a school. So there's a primary instrument. When you come into Berklee, you have to test in on an instrument to be able to play the fundamentals of like scales and chords and do your ear training and also be in ensembles. And up until this year, that meant that even if you were an electronic music producer, you had to play guitar or piano, something you could play scales on. But EDI stands for Electronic Digital Instrument, which is a little bit of a confusing misnomer. But yeah, so it's just electronic and digital. Yeah, but why not? I didn't get a chance to name it, but someone did. And it's all good. And so what it is it's one of those things where people now can play the computer as an instrument as long as they can demonstrate their ability and sit and play with other people, which they should be able to anyways. The instrument, the digital space is so vibrant now that the idea that you are stuck behind a computer screen and just on a keyboard and not fully exploring the expression the instrument implies is so I'm just so proud of being part of this wave at Berklee, where you now have people who are laptop controller grid thing out sitting alongside all these heavy badass jazzers, and they're all making that much more music together.
How many students are there?
There's 12 in this initial cohort, but there's going to be such a wave coming. It's crazy. Like those 12 only sourced, and those are the people that made it, only sourced from the local area because they're still figuring out the criteria for how to like allow someone into the program because it is such a high level thing. But you can imagine that like people around the world who have been like grew up with digital instruments, grew up with like push or like finger drumming or like theremins or who knows what, and now want to take it to the next place, like really, really get to be a badass. This school is so known for its like performative possibilities that I think once we really start to do auditions in China or auditions in Southeast Asia or auditions in India or auditions in Europe, like the capitals around Europe, it's like you're just going to, even if it's only a handful of people in each country, it's still going to be like hundreds that are there. That instrument is their thing. And this is the only school that's doing this right now. Yeah. And so I'm scared. I'm literally scared at what's coming.
You're not the only faculty member, right?
I'm one of the founding faculty of this department or this division, this thing. Yeah. So it's exciting, but the whole fact there's no pedagogy for this, if you're familiar with that idea that like most instruments, there isn't necessarily one way to play. There never is.
Mm-hmm.
But you think about the instrument, you think about the where your hands go, and you pretty much have an idea. Like when you're playing guitar, your left hand's pretty much on the fretboard, and your right hand's strumming. Nice. But you, and that's accepted. That's part of the accepted practice, and then the pedagogy of how you learn those.
Well, and it's been going on for hundreds of years,
but it's funny. It's not. Like the piano's not that old of an instrument. Electric guitar is a fairly new invention.
Mm-hmm.
It's like these things are old in our memory because it just feels like they've been around forever, and there's so many songs that use it.
Yeah.
But really, they're like recorded history is not that old, and the instruments themselves are not that old. So somebody not too long ago decided that was the right way to play, and people were just like, okay, that's the right way to play. But then you see, it's like there's always another way of people who are untaught or like trained differently. So the electronic instrument feels like this funny thing of so many man hours spent on building a thing that's available to use with some software or something, but not much idea of like how someone should approach the instrument.
Right. Yeah.
So that's our job.
Yeah. Did you use the monome, right? You didn't invent it.
No, I did not invent it. Yeah. No, I this guy Brian Crabtree and his partner Kelly did a lot of the work in inventing it. And there was other hands involved too on a software and hardware perspective. But they invented the monome, and they indeed are monome, and that is just like a grid controller. So I've been using that since 2003. I've been using that. So
will we see it on Tuesday?
Yeah. I'm playing a show on Tuesday at Bright Music Hall. If you're hearing this later, I used a monome, and people, maybe they were dancing. I think they'll be dancing. There'll be lots of dancing, actually. Even if there's only 5 of us, there'll be lots of dancing. Yeah. I'll be dancing. And
Griffin, you missed it, but he's not going to perform any of his own stuff.
I generally don't like to perform any of my own music. I'll tell you why, though. I'll tell you the listeners and yourselves why. When I take these songs that are meant to almost be whispered, maybe intimately in headphones, or maybe you've taken a break from the worries and cares of the world, and you are deciding on music. Like, I want this experience. And I appreciate so much people who have decided on me, or even if they randomly come across it in the Spotify algorithm, I'm still grateful. That being said, when somebody comes to a show and they just expect all of the world to be available to them, and they also expect the shape and form to be loud and boisterous and very prescient, very in the moment, very, without a future. So I shouldn't say prescient, anti-prescient. Like you don't want to think about tomorrow. You're there in the moment right then. No big wars from the past, just the thing that you're doing right there. Yeah. So I like this idea that you can take other people's music and I can distend it, contract it, and fit it into funny forms. But my own stuff is just hard. It's hard for me to reimagine it.
Right.
I'll still do it. I take requests all the time. I love it when somebody comes in and it's like, I need this song in my life. It's like, who am I to say no?
Well, also, I think a lot of times people go to shows wanting to hear stuff that they are entirely familiar with.
It's so crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like you can play a better version in your headphones.
Right.
Live it's just louder and in the air. And I love how it's embodied. You hear a band that you like and you're like, want to sing along. You want that sing along moment, but they're probably not going to play till the end of the set because it's probably the big song.
Yeah.
And then you have to clap to hear the song you want. So you have to like work. You pay money. You stand there for 2 hours.
Right.
At the end of it, if you don't clap enough, they're not going to play it.
There's also like the idea though that like when you have a really famous track, like say like Special Request is probably your biggest hit, would you say? Or
no, actually, but it's funny you say that. It's cool. I appreciate that so much.
It has a top plays on Spotify.
Yeah, it's not the most though. Like Order of the Golden Dawn is more played.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's like that's how the algorithm works. The algorithm wants you to like the song that other people like because it chills nicely and plays to your homework well.
And I think when you go to a show, like I think people who want to hear music that they know, it's not necessarily they want to hear like just exactly that, but they want to see the artist sort of do something with it, like put a few flourishes, like.
Well, but it's interesting with electronic stuff, like maybe put flourishes, but maybe not. They maybe just want it like woofier, louder, more subby.
Yeah. I guess that's just me. I want to like when I watch like DJ sets, it's like, oh, how did you get to like this track? How did you transition? Like everything. Yeah. So. Definitely looking forward to it. Have you played in Boston since coming, or?
No, this will be my first proper play as a Bostonian. So I've played in the city a few times, but always with this kind of thing of like, I'm leaving. I'm not sticking around.
Yeah.
It really changes the stakes.
Yeah.
And on a Tuesday, going up on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brighton is also great. It's a great space in there.
It's perfect for a dance. I saw Ross from Friends one of the first weeks.
Oh,
I
I was there too. Yeah,
Nice.
It's wonderful. Yeah,
it was great.
He was incredible.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's also Brain Feeder, so it's really
Yeah.
nice to see the label so diverse and all over the place.
Did you get to hang out with him, or?
Yeah, more so in the past than this run through, but yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah.
We had a show together in like Nijmegen, Netherlands, or in Belgium or somewhere.
Wow.
And it was rad. He's rad.
I'm curious more about like what it's like to be a part of like this Brain Feeder movement, because obviously it's taking the music world by relative storm. I mean, it's not like this is necessarily what's like popular. You're not hearing all these Brain Feeder songs on the radio necessarily, but
some
like,
Thundercat and some Kamasi, right?
Yeah, definitely that's pushing it. But I don't know, I feel like in terms of people that are like into music and musicians and stuff, like this is kind of the not necessarily the pinnacle, but it's like getting there for a lot of folks at least.
Well, I mean, I think especially as you now see someone like Salami being an addition to the label, and people who have taken musicianship in other or Lewis Cole, people who have taken the shapes of maybe familiar forms like jazz or like performed electronic music and really distended that concept. Igloo Ghost is another one that I would point to as being like changing the idea of a show, changing the idea of like artist output. Lapalux, like, or like Little Snake, like just altering our precepts and notions. The Brain Feeder works really well for that. They were strong about having an overall visual concept at first. That's a little further away now, but I think as far as collectives go, I don't think that many people can throw a stone at Brain Feeder, but I do think it's one of those things. It's just hard. I know how scrappy, even though Flylo obviously is like big in people's imaginations, it's a scrappy label that really tries hard to have kind of really forward put sounds at the forefront and making a home for all of us to kind of swim around in, just kind of explore the space. But, Kamasi's already moved on to what would some people would call a larger label, and kind of exploring that now, because as you sell out, 20,000 person arenas in certain places, it's like, or, Thundercat, I think as well. I think it still suits him very well to be on Brain Feeder, but, he's on such major projects nowadays. It's like, I wouldn't have batted an eye had he moved elsewhere, but maybe he understands the industry well enough that if you can have a label that you can really speak to every aspect of, you'll just have a better experience overall. As soon as you get to a label that you just don't know the names of the people, and I certainly had these experiences before with different larger entities, not necessarily larger labels, but larger entities with more moving parts. You start to lose track of the little bits, and parts go by the wayside. Little aspects that you don't necessarily put much weight on that actually really affect the experience of both the artist and the listener start to move around. And Brain Feeder's still really good about that, even though it is much a mystery, just like Captain Murphy. It's like, who? And then you also know what, but then it's also, huh? All that, for sure.
I was lucky enough to see Flylo at the end of August in New York City.
Cool.
So it was like with Brandon Coleman.
I saw that tour when it stopped through at the House of Blues here.
Nice, yeah. I mean, his show is just like insane for one, but it just felt like with the whole like night of acts and stuff, it felt like the absolute place to be. I mean, part of that was like I was there, so like.
But no. I mean,
I don't know. I feel that being a part of that, like, is there like a space for Brain Feeder? Like, because most of the acts are based out of LA, right? Or?
Well, increasingly no, but
okay.
I think at first absolutely. But then you Lapalux, Little Snake, Ross from Friends, they're all international artists. But that being said, even in LA, there isn't really, I mean, other than Flylo's house, there isn't really like a space that I would say is like, oh, that's where it lives. A lot of it actually, for a period of time, if I wanted to talk to the different artists on the label, I would go on PlayStation and play Overwatch or something, and I would find Teebs and some of the label bosses and Flylo and all that. I mean, Thundercat, Brandon Cole, like, it's just those people are there in the virtual space. And I do love the fact though that it's like a lot of other labels spend so much time crafting like a brand narrative, and they have their like business model plan of like how they're selling the merch and stuff. And Brain Feeder just has like one iconic logo, and it's kind of like you find it on some shirts. But like walking around the Berklee campus, like I see all kinds of different people wearing that shirt, and it's like it feels less like a brand identity and more like a real statement of purpose. Like any sound is good, and as long as it's like pushing the psychedelic, then it's like valid. It feels pretty nice. That being said, it's a mess. You know, the music industry is a mess, and why not the label too?
Cool.
On that note, thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming by. It's great that you're in town now, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Yeah.
But it is that kind of thing where there is some real strong local nights as well, like Nightworks. Are you familiar with Nightworks? It's like a beat, like straight up like pulling a page from Low End Theory versioning that happens here in town. And I've been lucky to go to a handful of them. They had Exile out for a show. It's definitely more on the southier end of town, but they're sourcing beat makers from all over, including from up in Portland, Maine, and elsewhere. Like the collective seems large and New England based, but I've been really impressed by the strength of people who have taken things like Low End Theory or things like Brain Feeder and not just rested on their laurels, waiting for them to be like deemed okay. Even though I think I think Razen played at Low End Theory, and there's some other artists that are local that have played those nights, but like just deserve more daps, more attention, because like gosh, they are holding it down for the city. And
Boston is an incredibly musical city,
right? Yeah, really. I feel of all those cities that I could have ended up randomly at, I feel very lucky it's this one. Yeah, that's great. Do you miss LA at all, or? Yes, but mostly for the food. Oh, okay. You get spoiled by the international cuisine on offer in LA, and here it's like you got some strong things. You might miss it for the weather too. I was cold today, and I wasn't prepared for 50 degrees. I'm gonna die in 19. Yeah, 2019, going out. Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful time talking to Daedelus. Catch him at the Brighton Music Hall on Tuesday, November 5th at 7 p.m. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you both. Yeah.